So 7:40 p.m. Fowler, Colorado, December 25th, 2016. I wanted to go over this list of all the different historical events that have happened on Christmas Day, the actual day of Christmas, but different years. So, in 1997, Charlie Chaplin dies. He was the great dictator. He had the Hitler mustache. He had that incredible speech where he says that he doesn't want to be a dictator. He doesn't want to rule over anybody. And he criticizes the fascists for having machine minds and machine hearts and how machines are not human. And so, therefore, fuck these machine minds with machine hearts. 1989, the Romania's dictator was executed. So Romania's dictators, the husband and wife, were gunned down. And I think they were communist dictators. 1989. So this is what, 27 years ago. So 27 years ago, bloodshed sucks, but the tree of liberty is fertilized with the blood of patriots and the blood of tyrants. And so therefore in 1989 in Romania on Christmas, their dictators were killed. In 1776, you have George Washington crossing the Delaware River, killing all those Huns, all those Germans, Hessians, and the British. Much celebrated the crossing of the Delaware, where he's standing on the boat, which he clearly would fall over if that was the case. And if you're standing at a boat, that's very dangerous. And it's, I guess it's a good image, but probably wasn't the way it happened. And the same day, Christmas, that's Christmas. But on the same day, and I think it was Christmas night, or that was the idea. Supposedly they were drunk, right? The Germans loved Christmas, so they were all drinking while George Washington was moving in on these damn drunkard, Christmas-loving Hessian heathens. And Plucky, a Mingo chief who came from Ohio, crossed the Ohio River, came south, was attacking some of John Rogers Clark, George Rogers Clark's men, and wound up getting killed. So he invaded Kentucky to get the white settlers out and wound up being killed himself. And so he gave up his life for the fight that he believed in. And in fact, I think it's Georgetown, Kentucky. When you go to Georgetown, you can hear Plucky and it's yell and it's echoes. So his spirit still lives there. Plucky Minoti. He was a friend of Taugayita, who was Johnny Logan, the great Mohawk warrior chieftain who had, they both came from the same town, Pluggy's town, and they, Tikhon Yatarito is actually George Washington. So Johnny Logan is not Kanatakkarius, that's George Washington, town destroyer. The Iroquois called George Washington the town destroyer. But the name of Johnny Logan is escaping me. Plucky Minoti and Taugayita. So Taugayita. Where have you been? So Colorado, it's legal to smoke marijuana here. I have some animal cookies that I'm just kind of chiefing on here. So what else? That happened in 1776 in Christmas in Kentucky. That's where that fight took place. Charlie Chaplin died. Isaac Newton is born. He is a man who actually did change the world, the scientific revolution, by the time he was 30 years old. So Isaac Newton just, completely changed the world. He had an issue with his mother that actually made me think about it. He had a stepfather, and his mother, was a complete obedient dickhole to the stepfather and shitty to Isaac Newton, and he just couldn't, make heads or tails out of the thing. There's that Grozmaz or something. There's some nerd fucking holiday, but instead of celebrating a fictional Jesus, let's actually celebrate Isaac Newton and all his scientific achievements. That fucking makes so much more sense. Isn't even the day that Jesus was born. He was born like several months ago. 25 other gods have the same birthday as Jesus. 25 other gods. It's the winter solstice. It's the winter fucking solstice. And I do think, I forget if it's colder or not colder, but the days are now, this is the longest night, the shortest day, so the days get wider and wider and wider. So actually, it should get warmer and warmer and warmer, theoretically speaking. But for some reason, I think, February's are pretty cold. The World Wide Web was first tested in 1990 on Christmas Day. The World Wide Web, right? I mean, oh my God, that's huge. 1968, Apollo 8 circled the moon. I don't know if they're the first ones to do it, but on Christmas Day in 1968, Apollo 8 is circling the moon. In 1814, this is something that actually does stick in my craw. There's another thing. The Confederates were pardoned on Christmas Day. I want to say 1868. I'm not 100% on that date, but it was Andrew Johnson, the shittiest fucking president in our entire history. It's because Andrew Johnson, why Reconstruction failed. And so, fuck Andrew Johnson. But the Treaty of Ghent, Henry Clay was a war hawk. And the War of 1812, which is what this treaty in 1814 on Christmas Day was signed. So now there's peace in the Middle East. There's peace amongst the Britons and the Americans. And actually, I want to say that Andrew Jackson is going to attack a legion of British troops in New Orleans after this treaty was signed, because it was in Europe and it took such a long time to get to the U.S. They thought that the fight was still going on. Now, the War of 1812, there was, substantial bloodshed for the proportion of the population. The Americans were trying to take over Canada. Tecumseh was killed. The White House was burnt down. The library, the Congress, the president's house, everything was burned down. Washington, D.C. was sacked. The British fucked up the capital of the United States. Worst the foreign policy disaster in American history. Worse than the Iraq War. If your White House, our White House hasn't been burned down. So that was worse. So that's the War of 1812. It's also called the Star-Spangled War, because the only thing that really came out of the War of 1812, since it ended in a stalemate, meaning we lost, we initiated a war, didn't get shit out of it. It was status quo antebellum, so the exact same conditions that had been previous, was the same boundaries, was honored. But let's see, I was trying to say that Star-Spangled War, because nothing came out of it except for the Star-Spangled Banner, which is, our national anthem, and you gotta fucking stand your ass up for that national anthem. And even though it was written by Francis Scott Key, a slave owner, he was even against white abolitionists and killed Reuben Crandall. So he fucking murdered a white man who was passing out abolitionist literature, and he said that abolitionist literature caused the riot. So the Treaty of Ghent was signed, so it's always a good thing for peace, and so that's a good thing. Another war thing that happened on Christmas 1914. Yep, Christmas Day truce. So in 1914, World War I was just beginning, but the people evidently didn't know that they hated the Germans and the English and the French. They didn't know they all hated each other. So during Christmas in 1914, at the beginning of World War I, the troops, the peasants, the poor people, the oppressed, the have-nots, they started kicking soccer balls with each other, singing Christmas carols, and on Christmas Day there was peace in the Middle East. There's peace in Europe. And so that's the Christmas Day truce in 1914. That's why, to put the X back in Xmas, Eugene Debs said, "I'm a Bolshevik." And 1914, if we listened to the people, we wouldn't have been at war. It makes me think of this sort of little dream a girl once had about, what if everybody just got on their knees and started praying? And if everybody got on their knees and started praying, then the war would just end, right? Just miraculously. Wow, that's so fucking stupid. This is just like that in some respects. The, oh, silent night. And then they just started, talking to each other, recollecting. They took photographs, the newspapers covered it, and it was all over the media that the troops of the enemy armies were fraternizing. And then the royal oppressors put an end to that. And the war went on for 3 more years. 5 more years. I don't know. Many more years after 1914. And fuck Woodrow Wilson. He jumps into the foray. And World War I that's a big example of how white civilization, Western civilization failed. World War I, World War II, yeah, white civilization, you failed. Okay? You guys are killing each other. So the Muslims were like, fuck them. Just let them all kill each other, right? Pulling a reverse Donald Trump. And, yeah, so that's wonderful. He's not president yet. Electoral College did vote for him, so, evidently the popular vote don't mean shit. Democracy is fucking dead in America. It's been dead for a while. Electoral College wants to refine your stupid ass fucking vote. They don't think, you're dumbasses, they don't think that you know what the fuck you're doing. They don't know what the fuck you're doing, and so the Electoral College could take it. So I hope it did scare some Donald Trump supporters that Hillary, who won the popular vote, which means she should be president, right? Let's be honest here. She won the popular vote. She should be president. But because we don't live in a democracy, we don't live in a real democracy, of course the will of the majority does not fucking matter. Christmas. A Chevy Impala. You had Marshall Fields in 1974 drive his Chevy Impala into the fence of the White House, and he didn't get killed. He thought he was the Messiah. He was dressed in makeshift garb, Arab garb. He had flares. They thought it was bombs. It turned out he wasn't a bomber. Afterwards, this was under the reign of Gerald Ford, who pardoned Nixon and will burn in hell for doing so. And the gates were made with reinforced steel afterwards. So it improved the security of the White House. So 1974, Marshall Fields drove a Chevy Impala into the White House gates. Gerald Ford was out on vacation. They said that he could have been killed had Gerald Ford actually been there, but since he wasn't there, they were more tolerant, and Marshall Fields lived to see another day. 1922, this one I want to actually expand a little bit more on, but it's Lenin's testament. His political testament was issued in 1922 on Christmas, December 25th. And the biggest part was actually on Christmas Eve, but the part that he wrote on Christmas Day, let me just read it actually verbatim. Stalin is too rude, and this defect, although it's tolerable in our midst in dealing with us communists, is intolerable in a Secretary General. He is warning future generations, Russians, and the Central Committee. He told this to his wife, wrote it down, he's going to die, so he actually doesn't release any of this until later on. But this is his thoughts on Christmas in 1922. One quick point, the Russian Revolution happened in 1917, both the February and the October Revolution. So that's two revolutions, 100-year anniversary in Russia. 2017 is going to be a very exciting time for Russians. 100-year, their centennial, right? Their 100-year anniversary of socialism, communist, being a communist, culturally communist, godless, socialist country. 100 years. And so, I don't know, hopefully they actually, overthrow Putin and get some new he's been in there forever. He's a fucking Stalin. Get Stalin, the new Stalin out. But he's saying that he's too rude. He's saying that he's intolerable as a Secretary of General. He says he suggests the comrades to think of a way of removing Stalin from that post and appointing another man in his stead who in all other respects differs from Comrade Stalin, having one advantage, namely that being more tolerant, more loyal, more polite, and more considerate to the comrades, less capricious. The circumstance may appear to be a negligible detail, but I think that from the standpoint of safeguards against a split, from the standpoint of what I wrote above about the relationship between Stalin and Trotsky, it is not a detail, or it is a detail which can assume decisive importance. Lenin was 100% absolutely right. Stalin was going to take over the Communist Party and then, be a dictator for 50 fucking years, running gulags and making communism very oppressive. But he was the first nation to do it, so he was protecting, sort of like Fidel Castro, his revolution. He was a revolutionary, but he wouldn't want anybody else to be revolutionaries. He also wasn't elected and therefore was an illegitimate leader. And they compare Stalin to Hitler, which was America's ally in World War II. So even though Stalin was a Hitler, the enemy of your enemy is your friend, so therefore we were best buddies with Stalin in order to stop Hitler. So that's something that Russians could be proud of. They helped stop Hitler. In fact, they did most of the fighting. Most of the fighting was, most of the people that had died was Russians, meeting the Nazis head on when the Nazis tried to take over all of Russia. So he's predicting a split between Stalin and Trotsky. Apparently, they got this tumultuous relationship. Stalin and Trotsky are not getting along. And I don't know if Stalin was a bully, give me your lunch money. Trotsky's like, no, I'm not going to do that. Then all of a sudden it just, breaks free. So he is predicting a split between them two. He's 100% right about that. In fact, 1984, in fact, that's how you think of the Russian Revolution. Stalin is, to be Stalinist is to be authoritarian and to hold state. Believe in the state. You are the state, and you're the monarch, and you have to keep your kingdom together. You're the face for your entire country, and you're the authoritarian, and whatever you say goes, and just everybody has to get over it. Just go along with it, or else get thrown in a gulag and be a fucking slave and face hardships and shit. They're godless communists, so they are trying to feed the whole people, but they had farm collectives where they were making everybody, join the farm, and then they would ration out all the stuff that the state would steal, the labor from the people, and then distribute how they thought was best. Communism sucks. Communism is fucked up. The authoritarian part of it is bullshit, just like authoritarian capitalism is fucking bullshit as well. So that's Lenin's testament. On December 25th, he says this relationship between Stalin and Trotsky is going to split. Stalin is big brother, and Emmanuel Goldstein is Trotsky. So Trotsky is the perpetual revolution. The revolution never stops. He's the intellectual leader. He was a part of the Bolshevik revolution. And so he's now, afterwards, after doing the bloody fighting, he is known for his political ideology, compared to Stalinism, which is how communism was in practice. Lenin, I think he was born in 1870, which made him about 54 years old. That's still pretty young, dying at 54 years old. And it was at the same time, I want to say it's like next month he's going to die. And so he's saying Lenin shouldn't be the Secretary General. Now he's dead. Did Stalin kill Lenin? I think it's Lenin did die under some weird circumstances. Whether it was Stalin or not, I have no idea. But is Stalin capable of killing Lenin so he could take the post? And he's the Secretary of General, so therefore he's now the tyrant, so he has all the power. The Secretary General became the fucking president or leader of Russia. So anytime, if you're hired on as a secretary, just wait. Wait for a little bit. Wait a couple days. One day you may be Stalin. You may be the leader of the country. As soon as you're a secretary, step one, you're a secretary. Step two, you're running gulags and you're a dictator for 50 years. So, the transistorized TV, Sony invents the transistorized TV in 1959 on Christmas. So that's scientific, right? The first test of the World Wide Web. The Internet, 1990. Apollo 8 circles the moon. Nixon's Christmas bombing is the last thing I kind of want to expand on. Make sure I have everything else. Yep, the Christmas Day Truce, 1914. Treaty of Ghent signed, ending the War of 1812 between the U.S. and Britain. Apollo 8 circles the moon, 1968. That's when we're doing all of our space explorations. Isaac Newton is born 1642. So that motherfucker is old. He's old, at 360, 70 years old. 300 years old. But that's only 370 years we've been doing this scientific, way of thinking. Plucky crosses the Ohio River in 1776. Charlie Chaplin dies. Roman dictators are executed in 1989. And last but not least, Nixon's Christmas bombing. So, I guess that'll be it for Lenin's testament. And the bigger one, he was basically saying the same thing, but I guess his Christmas little testament is more, I don't know, short, sweeter, to the point. Stalin's too rude. He's got a defect. So he does not need unlimited authority concentrated in his hands. And he says that he don't think he'll be capable of using that unlimited authority with sufficient caution. And Lenin was right. Lenin was right. So Lenin goes down as a prophet. He's the face of the fucking revolution. For Lenin, Lenin is the man. Lenin's the fucking man. in terms of the Bolshevik Revolution. He dies right after they established the thing, so now he lives in immortality. He's a founder, and everything that he had said and done, he was right all the way, from the beginning to the end. And will Stalin use sufficient caution when it comes to using his unlimited authority concentrated in his hands because he's the Secretary General? No, he cannot. He goes ape shit. He's like power, 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 power. Right? He just gets addicted to power. Nixon's Christmas bombing. He actually didn't bomb them on Christmas. It was a bomb around Christmas. He actually stopped the bombing on Christmas because the newspapers were calling it the Christmas bombing. He really hated that term. But he just got reelected, so he had been in office for 4 years, campaigned, and everybody hated the war. He says that he's going to get out of the war, but in terms of negotiating, he thought that he would bomb the shit out of them, carpet bomb the shit out of the Viet Cong, and that would force them to the table to go back to the terms that they had already agreed to a year ago. So Nixon went fucking ballistic. He went ape shit. Now, this was just in the days before and after Christmas. He literally stopped the bombing on Christmas Day just to be like, see, the media said it was a Christmas bombing when not a bomb was dropped. Well, you dropped the shit ton. They were scared, and they did come to the table, and they did agree to the original terms, but they had already seemed to be agreeable to the original terms anyway. So it's debatable whether the Christmas Day bombings actually helped us get out of Vietnam or not. We're going to get out in 1975. Nixon's going to sign a deal and for the Vietnamization of Vietnam. So we're slowly getting out, but in 1975, the Viet Cong overtake Saigon and wipe it out. And the Americans are the iconic images of Operation Flurry, I think, some kind of flurry where the helicopters are picking people up, and they just, more and more helicopters picking people up, the soldiers, the U.S. soldiers, off the rooftops. And so that's going to happen in 1975. But in 1972, Nixon escalates the war in Vietnam, and it's known as the Christmas Day bombing. So, yeah, fuck Nixon, fuck Kissinger. I still think they're assholes. It's bullshit that the Republican Party is so fucking insane that the Nixon is looking like a socialist, like a steady hand during chaotic times. He was very concerned about his place in history. He kept on writing shit through, up until the day he died. He was a secretive, creepy, fucking weird guy. He was a weird fucking dude. But he represents the face of conservatism, of American conservatism, of, I guess, maybe pragmatic conservatism, of actually running the country and making it work. But even Nixon felt like he was a part of the outside. He was an outsider to the political establishment, which means if the president is an outsider, who the fuck is actually running the show? Who the fuck is actually running shit? The owners, the lobbyists, the wealth of the bankers. Ultimately, the government has power. But do they enforce the power? Do they use that tool to bludgeon the corporations on behalf of the people? Do they go after the bankers on behalf of the common people? Or do they use government as a tool to come after the common people, make them pay up, so that way they can have these extravagant, corrupt, fucking little clique circles that are running roughshod over us good American people? So that's my Christmas Day testament. Lenin had a political testament. Jonathan Masters has a testament. Watch out for Stalin. The argument between Trotsky and Stalin did split the party. And eventually Stalin would kill Trotsky in Mexico. Trotsky had to be exiled, and while he was living in Mexico, somebody was able to find out where Trotsky lived, posed as a gardener, and then took an ice pick and slammed the ice pick down on Trotsky's head. So killing Trotsky in a very fucking violent death. He's living in Mexico, and still Stalin was able to get one of his henchmen to murder him. So, bad call by Stalin. Trotsky said Stalin was a traitor to the revolution. Stalin was a traitor to the revolution. Stalin fucked up communism and socialism for the entire world. But I guess being the first one, he's given some sort of leeway that, he was the only country. He had to protect his thing, so he did, by any means necessary, kept his power and kept the country together, which, he did, and helped stop the Nazis. And that sucks, because it's almost like human nature. He does all these heinous crimes, so you want to say he's a fucking beast, but then in the long run, history is like, it's okay. He had to kill people for the revolution in order to be getting the power, of course. He had to kill, Anastasia and all the Russian royalty Once he executed all the Russian royalty, then he got the power, had to hold on to Russia as a poor peasant country, which is where socialist revolutions actually happened. You know, Vietnam, Cuba, Bolivia. These are poor peasant countries, so that's communism isn't happening in the capitalist countries with a fatter working class. In fact, the working class is fatter, more selfish, more individualistic. So the possibility of getting them in a union is 0 to none. In the U.S., there's no solidarity. There's no very little bit of union movement or power for the union. So yeah, Nixon's Christmas Day bombing. 1972, Merry Christmas, Vietnam. You know, now all your kids are dead. And what we win in Vietnam? Every soldier that died in Vietnam was in vain. We lost Vietnam, just like the War of 1812. Every single fucking one was in vain. The war still continues. The global war on terror. Trump might get to become president. We would have to impeach him for war crimes. Let's not let this fucking president get away with this shit. No, we're not an imperialist nation. We're not in a war perpetually all the fucking time going after an imaginary terror enemy. It's just an idea. Okay? We've done this for 15 fucking years. It's the most important war, the longest running war in U.S. history, and we haven't stopped it yet. We need to put an end to war. War's going to put an end to us. Fuck war. Fuck Nixon. Fuck Trump. Fuck authority. And fuck all you fascist Nazi pieces of shit. Fuck all you fascist Nazi pieces of shit. God damn it. And Yoko Ono. Fuck Yoko Ono. Viva la Revolucion. Mwah. Peace.